I was halfway through drafting the dull part of the mission report when Earth stopped answering. That was my job back then. Commander William West, Inner System Survey Lead for a small, cheap vessel that nobody remembered unless it broke something. We had spent months out past Jupiter, mapping rubble and ice for resource models. Nothing heroic. Plot trajectories, tag a few rocks, send back data, come home and argue over budget lines. We were 9 hours from our first programmed handover to Earth traffic control when the silence started to feel wrong. "Handover sent," Billy called from the pilot's couch. He was ex-Navy like me, younger, sharper, with a broken nose and the lazy confidence of a man who had never actually been shot at. "No challenge yet." "They're busy." I didn't look up. "We're just one more inbound rock counter." Our vessel, the Scala, was old Navy hardware stripped down and repurposed, smaller than the tugs that shuffled freight in cislunar space. 4 regular crew, plus 2 junior techs cycling on this tour. I knew every sound the hull made when we changed vector, every quirk in the life support readouts, every way the outer sensors liked to lie. I finished the sentence I was writing for the mission summary, marked the file, and swung my chair toward the forward display band. Earth filled the center of the wall as we crossed the outer approach shell. Blue, white, the usual. Nightside packed with lights, cities bright, coastal grids intact, beacons on airfields strobing in neat patterns, nothing to complain about. Traffic volume? I leaned toward the left screen, where the nav overlay showed orbital slots and planned routes. Park, our systems specialist, pulled it up. Civil and military lanes look normal, maybe a bit heavy for this window, but nothing crazy. The strange part wasn't volume. Every route and holding pattern ticked along in clean, automated lines. What bothered me was that everything was running itself. We piped in the low-band chatter that usually irritates every pilot on approach. Civil controllers nagging cargo haulers, orbital tug captains arguing over priority lanes, private craft asking for extended loiter permits. The channel stayed empty. Only recorded advisories looped over and over. "Try them directly," I said. "Pick a civil tower, then a defense hub. Use mission credentials." Park went to work. "Scala requesting approach coordination from North Atlantic Defense Net." A beat of silence, then the neutral tone of a synthetic voice offering the standard menu: emergency channels, weather updates, satellite ephemeris, legal boilerplate. "Clarify live controller request." He did. The system repeated the options, patient and blind. He shifted to a civil tower, then another. Same pattern. "Good radio quality, full power, no one home." "Maybe some software patch went bad," Billy said, glancing back. "On every tower at once?" "Some backbone update, central push. I remember a bug years back that wiped out half the training sims on the ring." "Try direct to any orbital," I said. "Pick someone who can wave at a window." We pinged a tug, a hotel habitat, a repair platform. Machine voices answered. Autopilots, maintenance schedulers, billing bots. Not one human voice. I watched Earth on the main display while Park worked the board. Night shifted across the land. City lights stayed on. Navigation lines glittered along shipping lanes. No obvious thermal scars. No unnatural storms. Under the equator, something else waited. "Zoom that," I told Billy. He pinched the frame in, then in again. The object had been partially hidden by our overlay of geostationary slots. Once he pulled those markers back, the scale of it pushed everything else aside. A ship hung there, straight over the equator, hulls stretched across a span that made weather systems look small. This wasn't an orbital ring or a loose cluster of stations. It was a single structure, a slab of metal and composite, with its underside open to space. Machinery tiers stacked deep inside it faced downward toward the planet. Thin streams of material rose from the atmosphere into the openings, bright threads from refineries, industrial belts, graveyards, medical complexes, anything that could move bulk matter. Beneath our orbit, Our trajectory carried us toward its shadow. My neck tightened. "Billy, adjust track. I want us outside whatever that thing considers a work zone." He grunted and tapped the manual controls. The Scala's thrusters nudged us onto a higher, slightly inclined path that would clear the megastructure by a wide margin. "What is it?" one of the junior techs whispered from his station at the back. "It's the problem," I answered. "Park. I want everything. Radar, LiDAR, thermal, status broadcasts. If it breathes, we log it." We slid along our new path, the planet turning under us. Every time we came around the night side, more strangeness crept in. Passenger aircraft circled on autopilot. Some held to their stacks, others drifted, fuel running down to final fumes. Trains sat motionless on rails, interior lights still on. Ships floated in neat lines outside harbours, their navigation markers steady. City streets showed cars and buses frozen at intersections, some skewed across lanes as if drivers had vanished mid-turn. In every feed, doors were open, meals half finished on tables, equipment left running. No people. "Any live emergency traffic?" I asked. Nothing. Park's face stayed locked on his displays. Automated distress beacons, sure, but no live content. If someone's yelling into an antenna, they're not on any public band. I had spent most of my adult life listening for the tone of disaster in transmissions. None of this sounded like panic. It sounded like absence. We passed under the megaship's footprint on our second orbit, still at a safe offset. As we crossed beneath one of its open bays, the Scala's clock slipped. "Hold," Park muttered. "I'm seeing drift on the main time source." "How much?" "A handful of microseconds. Then it snaps back once we clear the vector." "Check inertial nav." He did. That feed had drifted too, but in a different way. For a short arc of the orbit, it insisted we were slightly closer to the planet than we actually were. Then it clicked back into line. "Some field effect," Park said. "Gravity manipulation, or something playing with the local frame. Whatever that ship is doing, it's strong enough to nudge our sensors." "Keep us out of its shadow," I told Billy. "I don't want to find out what the inside of that field does to hull structure." The planet kept turning under us. On our third pass, Park patched in the broadest chunk of radio spectrum he could grab and piped it through the bridge speakers. At first it was a smear of static, then shapes emerged inside it. The noise rose and fell in a steady rhythm, low and constant. Underneath, peaks and troughs formed, clusters of frequencies coming and going like crowded channels trying to talk over one another. No clear language, no repeating phrase I could grab. A dense, restless murmur. "Is that from the ship?" Billy asked. "Source looks planet-wide." Park frowned. "Hard to separate, but vector analysis points at the globe. Some of it might be bouncing off that thing, but the origin's the ground." "So the world's still talking," Billy said, "and we just can't understand it." "It's not talking to us," I told him. "At least not yet." I watched Earth and the nightmare hanging above it and understood that we were the only functioning mobile unit in range that wasn't already entangled. "New rule," I said. "No one uses personal bands to call home. For now, those channels stay dark." The junior techs shifted behind me. One of them started to object. "Commander, I have family and—" "I know," I cut him off. "We all do. Right now, we don't know what answers if you call. Until we do, no personal uplinks. That's an order." I let that settle. They hated it. So did I. It still stood. "Here's the situation," I said. "Earth looks alive from a distance, but every human system we can see is running empty. There's a ship over the equator that shouldn't exist. It's drawing material from industrial centers, graveyards, hospitals, anything that can move matter. Our clocks drift when we pass through its shadow. There's a broadband signal from the planet structured enough to be deliberate. No obvious hostile action toward us so far." "So what do we do?" Billy asked. "We stay outside arm's reach," I answered. "We look, we record, we figure out who, if anyone, is still in charge on the ground. Then we decide whether we can help or whether we get out. That last part came out more honest than I usually allow myself on duty. No one challenged it. On the display wall, one of the orbital camera feeds zoomed in on a field of something hanging in the open belly of the megaship. Rows of pale shapes hung from vertical racks, unfinished bodies rising into machinery. Below them, somewhere in the high atmosphere, fragments fell like fine powder, trailing in the wind. We watched in silence. The first live human voice reached us half an orbit later. Unidentified survey vessel. This is Continuity Administration's central bunker. Identify and state current control authority. The voice cut straight into our general channel. Tight, hurried, male. Park pulled up the origin marker. Surface bunker, he said. Subterranean, middle of an old federal complex. They're burning a lot of power to get through. Put them through. Record everything. I straightened my harness and faced the main pickup. This is Commander William West, Scala, Outer System Survey under International Resource Commission Charter. My voice sounded flatter than I felt. You have my authority codes in the packet we transmitted on entry. Confirm your situation. A pause, then the same voice returned, reshaped. He'd switched to the tone of a man who realizes he's the senior one left standing. Commander West, this is Director Lasker of Continuity Administration. We are the remaining Consolidated Civil and Defense Command Authority. We have partial ground presence and control over surviving strategic platforms. We need your help. I glanced at Park. He nodded. The codes matched legacy tags we had on file, at least on paper. Director, what happened? I asked. From here we see Earth lit and occupied only by machines. We see a large unknown structure overhead. We don't see any people. Lasker took a breath that crackled across the channel. You are late, Commander. The event began while you were still past Jupiter. A vessel of unknown origin translated into a forced geosynchronous position over the equator. It interfaced with every global system at once. We attempted defensive actions. They had no effect. Population centers lost consciousness, and then bodies disappeared in most urban zones. What you see now is the industrial ecology that followed. How many survivors? Unknown. We maintain contact with a handful of isolated bunkers, analog research sites, and obsolete platforms that were never tied into central grids. Our best guess is under 1% of the pre-event population remains physically intact and unincorporated. I let that sit for a heartbeat. What is that ship above the equator doing? I asked. We're seeing material flows from refineries and graveyards and hospitals into its open structure. We're seeing bodies. That is your job now, Commander. Lasker didn't waste words. You can see it. We cannot. Our uplinks are fragile. We need your eyes and your mobility. We also need you to carry out an action we cannot. He paused, then continued in a clipped tone. Whatever that thing is, it is using our people. The population is gone, but not dead in any conventional sense. Our analysts believe they have been converted into patterns running inside the alien system. The bodies you are seeing are products of that process. They are not fully human, and they obey no authority we recognize. Our models say that if we don't disrupt the fabrication process before those new forms are fully deployed, the human species as we know it is finished. Billy blew out a breath. I held up a hand for quiet. You have weapons, I said. You said you control strategic platforms. Some. Many were subverted. Those we still command are limited. We can target sections of the structure, but our line of sight is poor, and any heavy strike risks destroying what remains of the converted population inside. He let that hang. So you want us to pick targets, I said, and paint them. We want you to coordinate a direct strike on the lowest fabrication layers. His voice hardened. We need to cut the routes before that ship leaves orbit with its cargo. Park raised a hand. Commander, I'm getting another hail. Different origin. Hold that thought, Director. Stay on this channel. If he appreciated the joke, he didn't show it. Park patched the new signal to my earpiece. It came in weaker, laced with interference, but human. "Scala, this is Faraday Array," a new man said. "Research platform, analog systems, deep rural. We've been monitoring the pattern network inside the structure. Don't let continuity talk you into blind strikes." "Introduce yourself," I murmured. "Dr. Brandt, lead systems analyst. I'm abrupt because we're running on fumes. We've studied the traffic inside that thing for months. The population isn't just trapped. They're being used as decision modules. If you smash the hardware without care, you erase them completely. They're gone for good. Lasker is willing to pay that price. We're not. What do you want?" "We want to hijack the print queues." Brandt didn't soften it. "We can build an interface that lets us decide which patterns get new bodies and which don't. Triage, not salvation. It's still the only path we see that leaves anything recognizably human on the other end." Park flicked me a sidebar. "Commander, you're also getting a third hail. Corporate origin, ocean-based." "Patch it quietly," I said. "Audio only." The third voice came in dry and measured. "Scala, this is Director Calder of Foresight Vault. We maintain a seafloor facility, independent power, independent life support. We have our own population of staff and preserved neural records. We have logs from the first hours of contact with the equatorial ship. We're willing to trade that data for extraction. We have funds and influence off-world. We can pay. 3 live groups, 3 conflicting plans. And us, the idiot survey crew who had come home at the wrong time." I let the noise roll over me for a short moment and did what I always do when things go sideways. I pared it down to choices. I could side with Lasker, throw our weight behind smashing the machinery and accept the loss of whoever was trapped inside. I could side with Brandt, try to steer the process and accept that we were choosing winners and losers among the dead. Or I could take Calder's offer, give up on the planet, and get a pocket of elites off-world while the rest of humanity turned into raw material. None of those sat clean. Of the 3, the only one that didn't write off everyone past a small circle was Brandt's interface plan. Ugly and partial, but it treated the situation as something you had to hack rather than wipe. I looked at the megaship on the display. Material still streamed up. Fine particulate still fell. The planet-wide murmur pressed at the edge of hearing. "Park," I said, "do we have any secure channel capacity left that isn't routed through old government nets?" "A few narrow beams through private relay stations," he said. "Some were built for deep space asset control. Why? Use them. Set up a clean bridge to Faraday Array. I want their full data set on the pattern network and their design for this interface tool. Tell them we're willing to help, with conditions." Billy turned in his couch. "You're going with them?" "I'm going with the only plan that isn't just flipping the planet off," I said. "If that thing is the new environment, we're not blowing it out of the sky with 3 leftover warheads. Either we learn to lean on its internal levers, or we get washed out of the system. I'm not interested in being the man who wrote off every captured mine because he was scared of getting his hands dirty." I pointed at the megaship. "We're going to open it up and steal part of its control. To do that, we need a sample, a live body and its harness." "How do you propose to get one of those?" Billy asked. "Same way we get any sample," I said. "We go down." We picked a coastal city under one of the main material streams. In orbit, it was a knot of activity. Replacement bodies moving through streets, heavy machinery tearing up highways, new towers stabbing up from old industrial zones. From above, the replacements were lines of pale units marching in formation. On the ground, they felt worse. We brought the Scala down to a high, staggered orbit for faster insertion and prepped the shuttle. The shuttle was an old recon lander bolted to our back as an afterthought, meant for inspection of mining sites. Tough hull plating, a belly full of tools, no real armor. I took Billy as pilot, Park for systems, and one of the junior techs, Ben, for extra hands. The rest stayed aboard with orders to keep the main ship moving and pull us out if we stopped talking. We descended along a track that kept us out of the heaviest columns of material streaming upward. Thin dust layers scattered our sensors, but not enough to blind us. The city beneath us had been medium-sized once. From our approach vector, it looked like any other coastal sprawl. Port, industrial strip, ring roads, residential blocks. Now it was open and wrong. Vehicles were frozen in intersections. Cargo trucks stood in rows outside warehouses, with their cargo doors open. Cranes swung slowly in automatic safety cycles over empty yards. Apartment towers glowed in thousands of windows, but no silhouettes moved behind the glass. Replacements marched through it all in long columns, guided by taller units at their head. Their bodies came in a handful of templates. The smallest, most common model was stripped for utility. Lean frame, shaved head, joints that moved with quick economical stiffness. Most wore simple, color-coded harnesses, some with modular sockets along spine and limbs. The larger models carried extra joint sets in their legs and arms, plus a second pair of limbs folded along their sides. Many of those bore plates along their backs that could link together, like parts of a larger assembly. A third class was bulkier, with reinforced torsos and obvious mount points for equipment. None of them moved, like volunteers. Billy set us down on the roof of a mid-rise office block 3 blocks off one of the main procession routes. The shuttle's landing legs flexed against concrete cracked by some recent vibration. We cut the engines and sat for a second listening. Thin air, distant machinery, no voices. "Helmets on," I said. "Standard loadout. Don't fire unless we're cornered, or the mission collapses. Capture comes first." We moved down through the stairwell of the office block, past open doors and abandoned desks, half-full cups on tables, personal terminals still active, coats hanging on chairbacks. People had vanished in the middle of using their lives. Ben stared at a child's drawing pinned to a cubicle wall and muttered a curse in his own language. I tapped his shoulder and kept us moving. On the street, we kept to the shadows of buildings and service alleys. The replacements didn't seem to patrol. They followed planned arcs, always in formation, always at the same pace. At a major intersection, we stopped behind the rusted shell of a food truck and watched a column pass. They cleared a row of houses along one side of the street with a careful method. Some units went inside, walked from room to room, carried out objects and stacked them. Electronics in one pile, photos, books and paper in another. Furniture ranked by size and material. Kitchen tools in neat rows. Once the piles reached some invisible threshold, other units arrived with loaders, scooped the sorted material and moved it toward the port district. Above the intersection, the main highway had been torn up and reassembled into a shape that only made full sense from altitude. Sections of road had been lifted, rotated, pinned at new angles. Cars had been dragged into tight formations, colors and sizes arranged into bands. On our helmet link, Park overlaid drone recordings from orbit. "Sigil match," he murmured. "Same pattern we saw from the Scala. Every time one of these completes, the megaship lights up above. Then we stay off anything that looks like geometric art," I said. We shadowed a logistics group, a small convoy of replacements pushing low carts loaded with partial bodies and hardware. Some torsos twitched, some heads shifted. None were fully awake. They pushed the carts up a ramp into a multi-story parking structure. Inside, the lighting was harsh and uneven, some fixtures blown or flickering. The air felt weighted, as if the structure leaned into the hill behind it. We moved ahead on a parallel level and set up an ambush at a choke point, a narrow gap between 2 concrete support pillars where the ramps converged. I set 2 stun charges along the ceiling, tuned to the body mass of the smaller units. Billy picked a position with a clear field of fire and decent cover. Ben braced behind a concrete barrier with a capture net gun. Park set up the portable harness tap and checked his watch. "On your mark, I said. We waited until the first cart rolled into the gap. I triggered the stun charges. Blue light snapped between the supports. The first rank of replacements spasmed and dropped. Those behind them stumbled. A handful jerked upright and turned toward us. Billy hit the quick ones first, center mass. Their pale bodies took the rounds, staggered, and went down. Ben fired the net gun at the unit nearest the cart we wanted. The net wrapped it, dumped a heavy current through it, and dropped it. The remaining units regrouped almost instantly. No shouts, no hesitation. They stepped over their fallen and pushed forward in a tight line. We cut them down. When it was over, my ears rang from the shots in the enclosed space. The cart sat abandoned, bodies littered the floor. The unit caught in Ben's net twitched at my feet. "Secure this one," I said. "Park, get that harness off and sweep it. We're hauling it back up the ramp as fast as we can." We stripped the captured body of its control gear. The harness was a tight set of bands circling torso, skull and limbs, threaded with microcables. At the back of the neck, a hub sat over the spine. The flesh under the bands was pale and marked with small scars. The work had the feel of an industrial procedure run at speed. Efficient, indifferent. "Brain scans later," Park muttered. "Right now, we just get it aboard." We manhandled the unconscious body onto one of the carts, strapped it down, and started pushing back toward the exit. Halfway up the ramp, all of our helmet displays jittered at once. "Commander," Park snapped. "Time drift again. Local clocks just jumped ahead by almost an hour relative to the Scala. Now they're sliding back." The corridor around us seemed to flex. Lines blurred near the edges of my vision. A staircase on the left looked on successive glances as if it led both up and down. "Eyes front," I said. "Pick one direction and stick with it. Billy, keep the cart steady. If it pulls you, let it go before it drags you." We forced ourselves up the ramp and out into the street. The effect eased as we stepped into open light. My wrist display ticked back into alignment with ship time. We pushed the cart down a side street toward the landing zone. As we passed a mid-rise housing block, I caught movement in a shattered window. "Hold!" Through the broken glass, in the dim interior, I saw shapes that didn't match replacements. Bedding laid out on floors, makeshift water containers, scratch marks on the walls near stairwell doors. Someone had been living there recently. Maybe still. Ben shifted beside me. "Commander?" Before I decided whether to investigate, our helmets hissed with a proximity alert. Replacements were converging from 3 directions, closing a ring. A tall unit stepped into view at the far end of the street, limbs jointed in a way that didn't quite map onto normal human proportion. It raised one long arm and made a sequence of precise motions. Columns of smaller units altered course and picked up speed. "They have our trail," Billy said through his teeth. "There's no way we make it back to the shuttle if we stop," I said. "And we can't take a siege in that building. We're not equipped for it." We were blocked ahead by one of the new towers that had risen from the industrial strip. The lower floors were stitched into the reworked highway sigil. Our path to the shuttle ran directly past its base. "Charges?" 4 heavy ones pre-wired, enough to bring down some structure if we place them right. "We don't have time to place them right." I looked at the tower's supports. "We have time to bring down part of that tower and block the street." I glanced back at the housing block and its scratched warnings. "If we do that," Park murmured, "anyone in the lower levels is gone." "If we do nothing, we're gone," I said. "Then the harness is gone, and our one shot at an interface is gone. Pick your loss." I didn't mention that the replacements would clear that block sooner or later anyway. "Ben, plant 2 charges at the tower supports nearest the street," I ordered. "Short fuses. Billy, cover him. Park, keep that cart moving toward the shuttle. I'll buy us the minutes." We worked fast. Ben slapped charges onto concrete, hands steady despite the tightness around his eyes. Billy set 2 more at intervals along the base. Then we fell back up the street. Replacements flooded in from side alleys. The tall overseer unit watched from the far end, head tilted, arms still moving in a pattern I didn't understand. "Ready!" Ben gasped. "Detonate!" The charges fired in sequence. The base of the tower gave way. The upper floors dropped sideways, tearing loose from their anchor points and crashing down across the street in a grinding wall of rubble and dust. The wave of rubble crushed the nearest replacements and piled into a barrier that sealed the intersection. The lower levels of the tower, including whatever spaces had been reworked into living areas, disappeared into the collapse. "Move," I said. "We've carved ourselves a narrow corridor. Use it." We dragged the cart through side passages, stepping over fallen rubble and bodies, listening to the muffled grind as replacement units started working their way around the new obstacle. We reached the shuttle with seconds to spare. Billy slammed the hatch, engines lit. We lifted with barely enough clearance from the rooftop, the building shuddering under us from the tower collapse. From the air I saw replacements already swarming around the rubble ridge, already sorting scrap from usable material. No pause, no sign of distress, just adjustment. On the way up, a weak signal cut through our local channel. A voice, faint and distorted from somewhere in the ruined housing block. "Anyone up there? We heard you. We have kids." The transmission cut out mid-plea. The timestamp showed it had hit our relay window just as we blew the tower. I stared at it on my display until the hatch lights washed it away. Back on the Scala, we moved the captured body and its harness into the midship lab. The lab was a converted cargo bay with modular fixtures. It had seen more drills than real emergencies. That changed quickly. Park and the junior medtech stripped the body down, strapped it to the main table, and started working. Up close, the alterations were obvious. The skull had been subtly reshaped. Scans showed that regions associated with long-term memory and free planning had been pared down, while motor control and sensory processing were intact or expanded. The spine carried reinforcements. Along arms and legs, small sockets marked places where external hardware could latch on. "The brain isn't empty," Park said as he worked. "There's residual activity in deeper structures, some kind of basic identity fragment, but the higher maps are sliced down to reflex and task. The harness?" He tapped the hub at the back of the neck. "Active connection to the pattern network. Right now it's linked to a low-priority channel, more like a reporting line than a command uplink. We can follow it inward if we're careful." "So you can steer?" Brandt asked through the tight connection from Faraday array. His voice came out of the lab speakers with a background hiss from tired generators. "Not yet," Park answered. "We can listen and maybe tag. We still need the tools you promised." "And you have the body we asked for. Good. Upload your scans. I'll push you the interface shell as soon as it compiles." While the lab teams worked, I went back to the bridge. The megaship was busier than before. The streams of material from the planet had thickened. Along the underside, large shapes were building themselves, containers the size of small countries. Their surfaces rippled with structural elements that came and went in cycles. Our sensors picked up rhythmic activity inside them, like synchronized heartbeats. On the ground, more sigils appeared. Highways bent into fresh patterns, building shells rearranged. From altitude, whole districts looked as if a careful hand had drawn symbols across them using city blocks and roads. The planet-wide murmur had changed. It had more structure, more regularity. Park's spectrum analysis showed evolving bands, like a language learning how to compress itself. The calls from the surface factions continued. Lasker was furious when he learned we'd chosen to help Faraday build an interface instead of immediately arming his remaining platforms. "You're giving them control over our dead," he snapped. "Who elected Brandt to decide who gets a second life and who doesn't?" "Who elected you to decide who gets none?" I asked. "I carry the authority of the last functioning—" "You carry the authority of whatever bunker you're sitting in," I cut in. "That's not nothing, but it isn't everything. Right now, that ship in orbit has more say than both of us. I'm trying to find a path that doesn't end with either erasing everyone or handing them over entirely. He argued until he realized I wasn't moving, then cut the link himself. Calder from Foresight Vault was more controlled. We have data from the first minutes, he told me. We know how contact began. We know which elites signed off on early cooperation attempts in exchange for priority protection. They were fools. We can give you names. Names are for tribunals later if there's a later, I said. Right now, I need technical insight. He hesitated. We have samples, preserved neural tissue, pre-event recordings. We can offer those as seed patterns to prioritize when you get that interface running. In return, we want transport for our people. You want me to load your executives and their chosen experts onto my ship and run for the outer system while the rest of the planet is stripped, I said. That's the request. That's a crass way of phrasing it, but yes. Request denied, I said. Share logs if you want a voice in how we use this tool. Otherwise, stay in your hole and hope nothing digs down to find you. He stayed calm. Commander, if your little interface works, you'll be in a position to decide who walks out of this in any form. What you're refusing might be the only leverage you ever see. I'm tired of leverage, I told him. You want to contribute? You contribute. Otherwise, you're another bystander waiting to be digested. I cut him off too. It wasn't that I believed in some noble, balanced allocation of survival. We were far past that. It was simple arithmetic. The more factions with narrow lists plugged into the same system, the more likely it was to tear itself apart around us. In the lab, the harness woke up as Park and Brandt finished their work. The interface shell came through as a rough tool, a way to tag pattern clusters inside the network and push them up the queue. No elegance, no more ethics than a field triage chart. It was, however, real. On a console beside the strapped body, Park brought up a visualization built from the pattern traffic inside the megaship. It looked like a storm of routes, paths twisting and merging, each representing a cluster of encoded mental content. We can assign basic weights based on observed stability and coherence, Brandt explained over the link. Clusters that hold together under stress probably correspond to more intact minds. Those are the ones we want to prioritize. What happens to the ones we push down? I asked. They decay. Some fragments get used as components. Some bleed into noise. There's no way to save them all. There isn't enough fabrication capacity. So every time we lift one, we drown a dozen. Yes, that's the best option on the table. The harness connection pulsed on the display. Patterns flowed past. The interface tagged some clusters with small markers, marking them for future printing. Test complete, Park said. We nudged a few clusters forward in the local queue without tripping alarms. Local, I repeated. What about the core? To affect central distribution, we need a deeper node, Brandt answered. One of the major convergence points under the ship. Your tap here is just a side channel. So we need to go in again, I said. Not just to steal a sample this time, but to plug ourselves straight into the main vein. Park looked up. We barely walked out of that parking structure, Commander. I remember, I said. Next time we won't be walking in a city. We'll be crawling through the guts of that thing. That's the only place we can reach its route decisions. Billy came up from the shuttle deck, still smelling of engine grease and housing dust. You're planning to park us under that monster and drill in, he said. With what fuel and what hull? With what we have. I brought up the orbital diagram. We get under it, lock onto one of the lower machinery nodes and bridge this interface into the central pattern network. We do it once, fast, and then we get out. He rubbed his jaw. Lasker will lose his mind when he hears. Then don't tell him until we're done. The megaship's underside showed as a forest of hanging structures, each with its own local field effects. Some arcs of its equilibrium made our instrument readings wobble. Others pushed them into outright error. We find a path that crosses the least chaotic bands, I told Billy. Aim for a node Brandt marks as central and relatively accessible. We go in, we splice, we push our triage scheme, and we get out before it adapts. At the time, I believed it. I thought we were dealing with a system that would respond like any complex but static machine. You push, it moves, you get a result. I hadn't understood yet that we were teaching it. The insertion under the megaship was the ugliest flying I've ever watched. Billy brought the Scala down into a track just below the open decks. The view ahead was a maze of struts, conveyors, and suspended frames, moving at different speeds as they shuttled material and bodies upward. Every instrument we had protested. Gravity readings swung through values that made no physical sense. Our main clock split into two diverging lines before Park managed to pin it to a single inertial reference. Star trackers showed constellations shifting in ways unrelated to our motion. "Strip it down," I told Park. "Give Billy only the bare essentials. If anything starts telling him he's upside down and the sea is overhead, kill that feed." We ended up flying half-blind, guided mostly by internal accelerometers and a crude visual map of nearby structure. As we passed under one of the larger open bays, I caught a direct view into the fabrication terraces. Vertical racks held bodies at every stage. Limbs grew from seed stubs along frames. Torsos hung without heads. Heads sat in rows, eyes closed, waiting for attachment. Overhead, gantry arms moved, installing organs, closing wounds, fitting harnesses. Below the racks, wide channels carried away rejects. Bodies fused improperly, limbs grown at wrong angles, torsos bloated with excess tissue. Those dumped into open shafts that led downward to the atmosphere, where they fell toward the ocean pits we'd seen from orbit. "Target node ahead," Park called. "Marked on your display, Billy. Junction of major pattern flows." The node looked like a knotted cluster of cabling and consoles suspended near a cluster of racks. Data streams in the visualization converged there before fanning out toward bodies and containers. Billy eased the Scala close. Our extended grapples reached out and locked onto a structural ring near the node. We jolted as the clamps bit. The hull creaked. Nothing exploded. We counted that as success. "Boarding tube extended," Park reported. "Pressure seal good. We've got a narrow corridor to the node." I took Park, Ben, and one more tech, Korn, for the boarding team. Billy stayed aboard to keep the ship balanced on its perch. If he lost grip, we'd be scraped off like a barnacle. Inside the machinery, walkways ran between the racks, just wide enough for two people abreast. We moved along the path Brandt had plotted, past hanging bodies and transparent housings full of shifting microstructures. Those housings held the raw computation that used to be people. At the node, we found an array of consoles and bulkheads threaded with thick cables. The harness hub from our lab slotted into one of the open ports as if it had been made for it. That disturbed me more than I showed. "This is it," Park said. "Once we fire this, we're in the main flow." We wired in cut charges as well. If we had to break the connection fast, we'd blow the harness and the port instead of fighting software. I linked my helmet to the interface feed and watched the pattern visualization expand. It was like watching a weather map bloom. Clusters of encoded mines flowed past, labeled with our crude coherence tags. For a brief, terrifying moment, it looked as if we could simply reach in and rearrange their destinies. "Starting wait assignment," Brandt breathed through the link. "Prioritizing stable clusters from a broad cross-section. No narrow lists, no private sets. You have my word." I didn't fully trust his word, but I had nothing better. "Do it," I said. The harness flared with activity. The node around us thrummed. On the visualization, some clusters brightened as our tags took effect, rising toward new distribution routes. Elsewhere in the network, other people were pushing their luck. Lasker had dug deeper into our plans than we knew. He'd convinced one of his remaining technical teams to piggyback a control routine onto our interface path, aimed at giving continuity priority among the mines being printed. Calder had done something similar with whatever off-world help he still had, slipping in a list of privileged pattern signatures from his vault. I didn't see their code. I saw the system's response. The flow around us shifted. New markers appeared on the clusters we had just tagged, placed there not by us, but by the megaship's own supervisory layer. We had triggered a defensive adaptation. Across the visualization, wide swaths of pattern space went dark. Clusters associated with the external interference channels, including ours, Lasker's and Calder's, were reclassified as unstable and cut from the main routes. Bright threads dropped. Many vanished outright. In the lab aboard the Scala, our strapped replacement body convulsed. Park's assistant yelled that its neural readouts had flatlined. "Cut off," Park growled. "Hold," Brandt protested. "We still have access in some segments. Look at the decay," I snapped. "You're losing more minds than you're saving." He cursed into the link, then fell silent as his own displays confirmed it. We hadn't seized control. We'd taught the system to ignore anything that smelled like human meddling. While we watched, a new type of cluster began to grow at the center of the visualization. Patterns seeded from somewhere outside the original population map. They developed fast, taking on structure that matched none of our templates. As they swelled, a sensation like pressure built behind my eyes. The harness in the node was running not just outbound traffic, but inbound. "Commander," Korn gasped, gripping the console. "I feel—" His body jerked, his eyes rolled up. The harness links nearest him lit in our sensors as combined field effects climbed. "Backtrace," Park said. "They're sampling us through the link." "Cut it," I said. Brandt yelled for us to hold. "We need more time. We can still shape." I drew my sidearm and put 3 rounds into the harness hub. Ben triggered the cut charges. The hub blew, cables snapping, consoles spitting arcs. The pressure in my head dropped. Korn collapsed against the railing, groaning. The node reacted. Machinery around us shifted, arms folding in, racks reassigning routes. A bank of transparent housings emptied as pattern loads rerouted elsewhere. "Move," I said. "Back to the ship. Now." We ran. The walkways twisted underfoot as the structure adjusted to the damage. Some paths folded inward. Others extended into places that hadn't existed when we came through minutes earlier. We stumbled past racks of half-finished bodies being diverted to new lines. One overhead track broke free and smashed down where we'd stood seconds earlier. By the time we reached the boarding tube, the Scala was bucking against her clamps. Billy yelled that field gradients were trying to peel us off. We threw ourselves through the hatch and sealed it. Billy blew the grapples and fired the main thrusters. The ship tore free of the machinery with a scream of tortured metal. Gravity vectors spun through half a circle before Park forced them back into a pattern our instruments could handle. We climbed out of the megaship's belly with one engine crippled, half our auxiliary sensors dead, and a new problem aboard. Korn lay in the medbay, conscious but not himself. When I spoke his name, he looked at me with pupils that didn't track quite right. "You're here," he whispered, "and not here." Both plotted, all paths checked. I frowned. "Korn, focus. Where are you?" He laughed once, a short, dry sound. "Board 47 shows 3 options. You already took one. Others run in reserve." The words meant nothing to me. The tone didn't. Park showed me his neural scans. They didn't look like any head I'd ever seen. Structures inside matched segments of pattern we'd recorded in the node. "He's carrying a ghost of that system inside his skull," Park said. "A side effect of the sampling. He's not a full node, but he isn't just himself either." "Is he a threat?" "Not directly. Yet." Park shrugged. "But through him, the system has one more observation point in this ship. We have to assume that." On our external displays, the containers hanging under the megaship shifted pattern. Rows of lights along their hulls rearranged into new sequences. The heartbeats we'd detected inside climbed a little, then settled. The system had absorbed our interference, culled huge numbers of minds, and started building something partly based on us. I'd wanted to steer the process. Instead, I'd given it a lesson in hardening itself against human input. The launches began the next day. Time in orbit is measured in sweeps. You pass over the same ground again and again with only small shifts. Every pass under the megaship now showed more movement. The containers sealed, hulls closing over whatever populations had been packed inside. Thrusters along their flanks ignited in organized sequences. They began slow climbing burns away from the planet. Planet-side sigils carved into highways and districts reached a point of completion and then started to erase themselves. Structures were stripped, broken down, fed into new flows. It looked as if the ship had taken its measurements and no longer needed those big shapes on the ground. The planet-wide murmur adjusted. Its rhythms shifted in a way Park described as changing gears. I just heard urgency. On the bridge, we pulled up what remained of our offensive inventory. It wasn't much. The Scala carried a handful of kinetic penetrators meant for asteroid deflection and rock sampling. In theory, they could punch through thin hull plating. Against a structure the size of the megaship, they were toothpicks. Against individual containers, they were lethal. Lasker called again. He looked worse. More lines on his face, fewer men behind him. "You failed," he said without preamble. "Our logs show a massive spike of pattern loss after your little stunt in the machinery. Whatever you thought you were doing, you erased a vast number of mines with no visible gain. I kept you and Calder from turning them into a private club," I answered. "That's the gain." He slammed a fist on his console. "There is no time left for games. Those containers are leaving. If you let them go, they'll spread this to every world we ever touched. You must use what you have and hit as many as you can. Treat them as infected ships, burn them out. You understand every container you want me to hit is full of whatever's left of the captive population," I said. "Whatever I don't already have on my conscience, that would finish." "Those people are already gone in any meaningful sense," Lasker said. "What matters now is preventing this system from replicating. You're not killing them. You're putting their remains beyond use." He believed that. Knowing that didn't make it easier. After I cut the link, Calder stepped in. "Commander," he began, "don't ask again. I'm not your ferry." His lips thinned. "Then listen. Our early logs show something you haven't accounted for. The first contacts with that ship weren't entirely one way. Some of our people tried to bargain. They offered their minds in exchange for guarantees. I can imagine the guarantees. Survival, continuity, access to whatever came next. The ship accepted their inputs, stripped them down, and discarded their demands. Your man Korn proves that it learns from every human it touches. Whatever you just did in its machinery is now part of its decision model. You're in its history." "I suspected as much." "Then understand this," Calder said. "You can't ever be sure that what you do now won't be used as precedent later. You're feeding it either way. The only question is what you want to give it." He meant it as a warning. To me, it confirmed the ground I already felt under my boots. Brandt called for the last time not long after. "We're done here," he said. Alarms sounded behind him, flat beeps of overstressed systems. "Most of Faraday Array is gone. The megaship reclassified our facility as surplus structure and sent replacements to clean us out. We held them off for a while with manual defenses. It didn't matter." "I'm sorry," I told him. It was small and late, but it was true. "Apologies are cheap," he replied without heat. "Listen. Before they cut through the last doors, I got one more look into the pattern map. There are templates in there now that look like your ship. Not exact models, conceptual. Network nodes clustered around a central hull with a handful of human operators. It's building smaller carriers alongside the big containers, using your design as one of the examples. A small navy of Scala-like craft, multiplied and sharpened by alien design." "Distribution vectors?" I asked. "Everywhere we ever sent a probe. Out toward every resource field, every outer settlement, every gate we ever used. Your logs are part of the feed now. Your old survey routes are going to become its roadmap." The line crackled. He drew a slow breath. "You tried to steer it," he went on. "You're not alone in that. We all tried in one way or another. That's why it is what it is now. It's a mirror in its fashion." "You want last words on record?" I asked. He barked a short laugh. "No speeches. Just this. Whatever you choose now, make it specific. Don't think in symbols. Don't aim for clean gestures. Those are the ones it seems to like best. It turns them into rules." Then the line went dead. I sat alone on the bridge after that, watching the containers climb and thinking about rules. What was left to do? We could fire every kinetic round we had at as many containers as we could line up. We'd kill whatever was inside them and maybe stagger deployment for a while. The ship would adjust. It had already shown that. We could do nothing. Let all of them go. That would keep every captured mind as intact as the process allowed and guarantee that the new system went outward at full strength, carrying our mistakes inside its logic. Or we could do something in between, something as narrow and grounded as the rest of my career had been. I pulled up the pattern logs from our node intrusion. One cluster interested me more than the others. It was the one that had spun up when corn was sampled. Park helped me trace where it had gone after we cut the link. It had migrated into one of the containers, now climbing along a particular ascent vector. That container held a disproportionate number of patterns touched by our interface run, including the projections based on our crew. "Can we identify that one in flight?" I asked. "With moderate confidence," Park said. "Its drive signature and internal pulse pattern are distinct enough." "How many other patterns are in there?" "Millions. There's no such thing as a dedicated box. The system mixes population fragments like paint. If I hit that container, I'd kill far more than the shadows of my crew and our meddling. I'd burn a cross-section of the dead. If we do nothing," Park went on quietly, "that container reaches wherever it's going and unloads versions of us into whatever comes next. Versions built from what we just did." "Give me firing solutions," I said. He worked in silence for a while, then brought up trajectories. "We can hit that container with 2 penetrators at this point along its climb," he said. "We'd have to divert power from our shield envelope and accept some risk, but it's possible. After that, engine wear means we won't get many more shots at anything before we need serious repair." I studied the arc on the display. It crossed some of our old survey routes. Billy came in and leaned on the rail beside me. "You're going to do it," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'm going to hit one," I answered. "Not all, not most, one." He nodded slowly. "Any particular reason that one?" "It holds the biggest share of what we gave it," I said. "If there's a container I can justify erasing, it's the one built around our mistakes. I won't pretend that wiping everyone in there is justice. It's damage control. It's the only damage control I see that's small enough to be honest about." "And the others?" "We let them go," I said. "They're already gone one way or another. I'm not going to empty half the sky so I can feel decisive. Lasker will call you a coward. He's welcome to send me a letter." When the firing window opened, I went through the checks with the same calm I used for routine survey work. Target lock, trajectory confirmation, rubble plume estimate, shield reconfiguration. "On my mark," I said. 3, 2, 1, fire." The Scala shuddered as the first penetrator left its rail. The second followed half a breath later. On the external display, the chosen container was a distant shape crawling up from the planet. For a time, nothing changed. Then a dim flash sparked along its spine. A moment later, another. The container's hull bulged, cracked, and split. Pressure vents blossomed from the fractures. For a brief instant, we picked up a scatter of life signs in the plume. Then those faded. The container broke apart and tumbled, pieces burning against the thin upper atmosphere before falling toward the planet in long arcs. "Impact confirmed," Park said. "Any reaction?" "The remaining containers are adjusting vectors," he replied. flight paths shifting toward more oblique angles, some heading for high eccentric orbits, others toward the outer planets. The main ship is rebalancing its internal mass. On the pattern monitors, the planet-wide murmur changed shape again. It didn't sound angrier, just updated. Korn in his bunk rolled over and whispered something too soft for my mic. The medtech listening in told me later that the fragments matched ones we had once tagged in the node. They no longer existed anywhere, except in his altered brain. Earth's city lights began to wink out over the next hours. Some grids failed in big chunks as infrastructure was stripped. Others dimmed slowly as systems ran down. I thought about staying. We could have dropped to the surface, linked up with whatever bunkers were left, and spent the rest of our lives picking through ruins while we waited for someone else's cleaned-up future to arrive. Instead, I pointed the Scala's damaged nose outward. "We're leaving," Billy asked. "We're changing to a higher, wider track," I said. "Away from the megaship's main influence bands. If we can repair enough drive to reach the outer system, we will. I want distance and a long view." And then what? Then we listen. We log. We survive as long as we can. If someone somewhere ever wants to know how it started, we make sure they have more than a myth. On the last close pass we took before climbing, we picked up the megaship's transmissions in a new form. The planet-wide murmur was no longer a cloud. It had nodes now, discrete points of stronger emission. Each container had become one of those points. Their signals stretched and separated as they moved along their routes. Park overlaid their positions onto a star chart built from our own survey records. For a second, the pattern that emerged resembled one of the sigils carved into Earth's highways. Nodes, links, angles. A thin line extended out along a track we could trace, a path toward the outer dark that matched, uncomfortably well, the standard corridor for survey vessels leaving the inner system. Our projected course lay along that line. We were already part of the diagram. "Turn it off," I said. Park killed the overlay. The chart went back to scattered points. We burned for higher orbit with our crippled engine. The megaship grew smaller behind us but never quite left the frame. The containers became dots, then less than that. In the med bay, Korn sometimes answered questions before anyone asked them. He never remembered doing it. Piece by piece, we learned to live around whatever lived inside his skull. On quiet shifts, alone at the bridge, I dictated logs. I described the empty cities and the hanging racks. I described the pits in the ocean and the freeway symbols. I described Director Laska's fury, Dr. Brandt's worn voice, Director Calder's soft threats. I described the way the pattern map had bloomed and then gone dark under my hands. I didn't talk about heroism or guilt. Those are words for monuments. I talked about decisions. What we knew in the moment, what we guessed, where we were wrong. The system we met above the equator will leave this star eventually. It will carry pieces of us in its hull and in its logic. Some of those pieces will be mine. I can't unteach it what I've already shown. The only thing I can do now is add one more small fact to the record. That when the time came to choose between killing everything and killing something, one mid-career survey commander picked the smaller grave. Whether that ever matters to anyone but me is not my call. My call is to keep the Scala pointed at the dark and keep talking until either the air or the memory runs out.